Hello everyone, this is Chase Pounds. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing another 20th Century Fox film, 1953's Titanic. Now, most of you are familiar with the 1997 James Cameron's Titanic, starring Leonardo DiCaprio opposite Kate Winslet. Especially if you're, especially of my generation, of a young generation, you may be familiar with this version. Probably what comes to mind when you hear the name Titanic, images of the film come up more than the actual historical event. But some you may notice, but those you may not notice, that really there have been dozens of films on the Titanic, actually going well back to the very year of the sinking itself in 1912. The first Titanic film was actually started off as newsreels of Titanic's sister ship Olympic. So many documentaries you probably have seen on the Titanic, or really seen these footages of the Titanic leaving the port, is actually of her sister ship Olympic. And actually the first footage of the Titanic is of there's only one footage of the Titanic that exists. That's where she's on the dry dock in Southampton. It's just a few seconds long. And but the first feature film about the Titanic was Saved from the Titanic, which was supposedly a survivor, which the actress who played the actress was actually an actual survivor of the Titanic by the name of Dorothy Gibson. And actually, she got into the very first lifeboat to leave the ship. Supposedly, I heard. And unfortunately, this film doesn't exist because supposedly it was destroyed in the fire in 1914. As so I heard. But that same year in August of 1912, Germany had made a film called Night and Ice, depicting it sinking the Titanic. You can still find this video today on YouTube. That following year in 1913, Denmark made a film called Atlantis, which is a fictitious story a story of it features a ship. The actual ship they used to shoot they shot the film. It was on the actual ship, and it sinks. So I guess that was loosely, reflecting the hoopla club in the in the in the in the I guess the pop culture at the time of surrounding the Titanic sinking, the wake of the Titanic sinking. And then it wouldn't be until 1929 that you have another film called Atlantic, which again is another fictitious film, which I actually own, by the way. And it's another fictitious film about a ship that ship, but though it's a fictitious film, it's not about the Titanic, but it's the same events. It's a ship that strikes an iceberg, is doomed to sink, and with people who are left behind on board. Actually, interesting fact though that there actually was a ship built by the White Star Line that built the Titanic. Before the Titanic even was built, there was a ship called the Atlantic, and it ran aground around in the 1870s. Ran aground, also killing a large number of people. And when this film came out, I guess it brought back regulations of that shipwreck. And it would be about about 2 decades later, that when during the outbreak of World War II, during the rise of Hitler and the Nazis, there was another feature film, to be called Titanic, which this was a German propaganda film, which the film mostly portrays, was again, a propaganda film, which portrays the British as being, I guess, arrogant, very hubris, and I guess it was the way to make the British look bad, because that's how, I guess, during the time the war, the Germans did not like the British, and they saw them as the enemies. So this was a way of exploiting them, and they used the Titanic disaster as a vehicle to get their message across. And about 10 years later, it would be until 10 years later, 1953, 20th Century Fox would come out with its Hollywood version of the Titanic by the same name as Titanic. The film, which this is the film I'm going to be discussing. This film starred Barbara Stanwyck, Clifton Webb, Robert Wagner. Those who are familiar with Barbara Stanwyck may mostly know her for she was a popular. Well, those who may not know Barbara Stanwyck, she was a popular actress of Hollywood's golden age. And she was in such notable film as Double Identity and Stella Dallas, which there's some films that come to mind when I hear her name outside this film. Then you also had Clifton Webb, which Clifton Webb is someone I guess I kind of admire, someone idolize, because I like his style of classiness and, I guess, sophistication, which I haven't really seen much of his films, but I haven't seen much of his films other than I've seen a few. I think Laura, and he was in another film called City Pretty for Heaven's Sakes. For Heaven's Sakes, and then that's one of the films that come to mind of Clifton Webb. And then there's Robert Wagner. I mostly know him from The Towering Inferno. Towering Inferno, which was another film made by 20th Century Fox later. And he was in the Airport series, the last airport film they made, the Concord Airport 79. You mostly know him from the TV show Heart to Heart, and he was married at one point to the late Natalie Wood. And it's been said that Robert Wagner had a behind the scenes of this film had developed between Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Wagner. They developed a relationship with them making this film, and it was quite scandalous for his time because Robert Wagner was underage and Barbara Stanwyck was up in age. So it was quite scandalous for its time. What the film is about is about a fictitious family that was on board the Titanic, and it deals with the couple named the Sturges. The couple is named the Sturges. The family is named the Sturges, and the mother is trying to get their kids away from Europe because she I guess is tired of the aristocracy, the rich aristocracy life, and yearn for the simple life of America. And she and the father, Mrs. Sturges, Richard Sturges, falls I guess tracks them down and follows them on board the Titanic, and he tries to I guess reclaim the children, which are Norman and Annette Sturgis, and again they there's a lot of friction and conflict within the family because, as I said, the mother is trying to yearn for a simple life in America, life in America, and for her children, such as she doesn't want her son Norman to have to be be picked up by a carriage to get to go to be driven to school by a carriage, where the average American, I guess, way was to walk to school at that time, and that's one of the things they debate over that, and it gets more there's more conflict within the relationship throughout the film, such as he's trying to claim custody of the son, but of course, Mrs. Sturgis is saying that's not his son, so he kind of withdraws. So Mr. Sturgis kind of withdraws from the family, doesn't want to be bothered most of the rest of the film with having anything to do with the children or I guess wife. And at the end, they try to fix their relationship and try to make up for make up for their conflict. Try to make up for their conflict, but that's all cut short with the Titanic disaster, as the son gives up his place for another lady, and he stays with the father on board and they both die, and the Titanic sinks in the Titanic disaster. I'm probably spoiling it for those who haven't seen it, but that's the way the film ends. And then at the same time, Annette, the oldest daughter, has a relationship with Robert Wagner, with the young Robert Wagner. I forget what the name is the name of him in the character name in the film. But so that's the film, and in my opinion, I think the film is well put together. The acting was superb, special effects were superb, casting was good. The only thing, though, and this is something that a lot of Titanic historians may critique, is the film wasn't really historically accurate with the actual event, such as the decor. One thing I would critique was the design of the ship does not resemble the design architecture of the actual Titanic. Though they do have a version of their grand station in the film, but it does not resemble the actual Titanic's grand staircase. And some of these sets, I think, were recycled in other films, reused in other films, such as Dangerous Crossing, which also came in 1953 after this film. It was also another 20th Century Fox film. And then I think it was also used in another film I seen called it was a Marilyn Monroe film. I forget the name of it, but it was done in Technicolor. One of the things that also was featured on the board was like a clothing store, a tailor shop, which that wasn't known to be on the actual Titanic, a tailor shop. And other accuracies could have been the style, the fashion doesn't reflect the era of 1912, such as the way they dress, the period attire doesn't reflect that era, such as the scene with Clifton Webb where he's wearing what appears to be a sports jacket, a blazer, a sports jacket, with light khaki pants. He's wearing a chauffeur's hat. That's not something they would have worn back in 1912. And then the style of music, I guess the music didn't reflect the era as well, such as the bands playing like horn music that sounds jazzy, which that would have been popular at that time. It would have been like classical ragtime music or a waltz. And it seemed like they were trying to modernize it with the I guess modernize the film for that era, and like they add historical elements to it, but yet they try to modernize it for the period this was made in the 1950s. And as well, they have notable characters on the Titanic, but passengers and crew members, but they seem to alter some notable characters with fictional names, and they also leave out a couple of passengers who are known to be on the Titanic, such as Thomas Andrews, the ship designer. He's left out, and he's left out in some few other Titanic films I know of. And then you had and then up to the sinking itself, near the end of the film, the ship sinks. Is a lot of historical inaccuracies, such as they show the iceberg hit the wrong side of the ship. Though they do show the ship on the ports on the starboard side, like it's been like it's been suggested, like it's always been said. But there's a scene where it's underwater where the ship of the port side is opening up, which I don't understand why it was set up like that, because it was on the iceberg was on the starboard side of the ship, but they showed the port side underwater opening up. So I never understood that. Then one of the big in historical accuracies, I guess it's based. I have a picture of it. But because they speculate that the port side was listed, there was a list on the side of the port of the ship. So I guess they thought that why it was listing was because the port side was opening up, but that was not the case. The port side never did open up. Here's a scene of from the film of the ship listing sideways. Here's footage of the 1953 Titanic in the dining room on top. And another big inaccuracy was they showed the ship show series explosion as the ship sinks, and that's in real life that's not, of course. I also forget to mention that during the evacuation they show them having an alarm system with the when they're evacuating the passengers, they have an alarm system. Of course, in the real Titanic, there was no alarm system. And it kind of played a part in the tragedy because people weren't aware of the danger, and some were reluctant to get in the lifeboats. And the alarm system kind of sounds like the same alarm system they used in the Poseidon Adventure before its ship is struck by a tidal wave. And then then as the ship sinks, they show a series of explosions, and there was no, and there may have been, of course, that's also, if you know the story of the Titanic, there was no serious explosions. Some people, it's been speculated there may have been the explosion may have been of the ship breaking apart, which that's also left out. Because this was before the wreck was discovered, there was no knowledge of the ship breaking apart, which that was all left out in a lot of early Titanic films, a lot of retro Titanic films, that the ship broke apart. And it only was in recent films and recent documentary reenactments as the founder discovered the wreck that they show the breakup. And and I don't think there was really much research that was really done when they was making this film, or fact checking, because this, I guess, at that time, people, I guess, and then the film wasn't really solely based on only about the Titanic, but it was more of a focus on the family. But that was, I guess, again, at the time, it was no, I guess, interest in the Titanic, and this is an era, and this happened several decades before, and this was, as I remind you, 1953, and this was after World War II, and we were just getting out of World War II. Then following World War II, ushered in the Cold War. I mean, in the Korean War had broke out between 1950 and 53. I don't know when in 1953 the Korean War ended, but when this film came out. But it's also been in some of the documentaries I've watched, including Beyond Titanic, that that the film kind of reflected attitudes of people losing loved ones at the end, and losing loved ones during the war. And that's the film. This is a film I always treasured a lot since I was in third grade as a kid. I remember I used to go to the library and rent the film on VHS, and watch it rent it on several different occasions. And unfortunately, the Titanic film I like, but despite the film's historical inaccuracies, I still like it. I guess because I guess the special effects and the plot and the way it's told, but even though it's not historically accurate. Unfortunately, I don't own one of the films I don't own. I do own as I said, Atlantic. I also own A Night to Remember, which is considered the more historically accurate Titanic film. I also own the 1996 miniseries with Catherine Zeta-Jones, and as well as, of course, the 1997 James Cameron and Ghost of the Abyss. And that's the only films I own of the Titanic. But then I also want to mention there was a documentary that was on special features when I used to watch it on DVD called Beyond Titanic, which I used to watch since I was 10 years old. And I still sometimes find it sometimes be hard to find on YouTube, but sometimes I'm able to watch it. Here's another all the documentaries I see on the Titanic. That would be my most favorite because the documentary focuses on the aftermath of the Titanic, including a lot of the pop culture events, and as well as chronicling all the films that are made. Most of the films are, as well as TV cameos, and as well as film cameos and TV cameos that relate to the Titanic. And that's the only documentary I know of that really focuses on the aftermath and all the films that are made of the Titanic. And not only that, it also makes a connection with the fictitious disaster film, the Poseidon Adventure, which if you see which I mentioned that other film before on my other YouTube, on my other video. Even though in the documentary, it says that even though the Poseidon Adventure had little to do with the actual with the actual tragedy of the Titanic, but as I point out in my YouTube video, that there were some elements that were kind of similar to the Titanic, and it also features also the same director who did the Poseidon Adventure, Irwin Allen. It also featured the time tunnel, which I told you before about the people that went back in time aboard the Titanic, and they try to warn the captain that the ship is going to sink, and it ends up sinking again. And though in my opinion, also leaves out a lot of other notable TV films such as 1979 made for TV SOS Titanic. Also leaves out the Daniel Steele made for TV version of No Greater Love. It leaves out the Night Gallery episode Lone Survivor, Voyagers, which also is a similar concept of people go back in time to save a painting of the Mona Lisa, but also try to warn the captain that the Titanic sinks and he ends up sinking again. Just a similar premise as the time tunnel. And though of course I know the documentary is not able to mention every event, every event, because I guess it's under a certain time limit. Then some of these films may not have been really known, relatively known, I guess, or popular to talk about. But again, I like this documentary because it really focuses on the aftermath of the Titanic, and I've never seen any. There's never been all the Titanic movies I've seen. There's none been like that talks about the aftermath in the films. I also mentioned History is Made in the Night. That's not also left out, and it's also in the book right here. All the collages, all the films were made. The Titanic, this magazine I got from Walgreens one time, 25th edition. It talks about all the films on the recent James Cameron. So that's my video of 1953's Titanic. Feel free to watch it. Feel free to watch Beyond Titanic. It's another video by James Cameron. Stay tuned for my next video.